Hello and good morning. I hope this finds you all in good spirits as our city begins to reawake carefully. My name is Greg Ingham of Media Clash, the publisher of Cardiff Life, and welcome to our third Cardiff Life Business Club, a property special. The business clubs feature candid insights on how we're all seeking to navigate these very strange, unprecedented times, personally, professionally, and managerially. Times when we could all do with help, all do with the wisdom of others and the insights that they bring as we figure out what comes next. And our focus is increasingly shifting to, rather than where we've been during lockdown, to what happens next, how we respond, how this city redevelops itself. Of course, there is no monopoly on wisdom, hence the running of these sessions with some great insights we will have again today from our panel. Before coming on to today's event, I did want to congratulate once more all the winners of the Cardiff Life Awards, which was held virtually of necessity, but with something like 3,500 logins last Thursday, enabling many more to share the celebration of this city. And also to see the joy of the winners. What was quite remarkable, there's one in particular, Beth Morris, filmed the very moment that she won and her family were there to see it. The family duly went wild, and that video has had a remarkable 10,000 and counting views on social media already. Again, it shows the power of the reach of social media, but also the value of, we think, the value of the awards. The awards go deep, and I'm sure that our newly unfurloughed team will be delighted to talk with you about the power of the awards come the real version in March 2021. Our thanks also to our sponsors, and I will give them a shout out again for supporting those virtual awards. Marsh Commercial, For Cardiff, Savills, Hawkins Thomas, Cardiff Blues, Park Plaza, Gennaro, and Cardiff Life itself, of course. One other on awards, which is germane to today's conversation, the Cardiff Property Awards. Following what we were absolutely delighted with the sellout success of the inaugural awards last November. These are currently planned for Friday, November the 13th. I stress currently planned because we're all having to make contingent decisions. Unsurprisingly, we are assessing the best route forward for the exact timing of the Cardiff Property Awards, but come what may, of course, they will be running. It's vital that from our point of view that we run them, but we think from the sector's point of view as well, all areas of the value chain to come together, both in a celebration of the sector, but also, of course, for networking and for business value. It's a business development opportunity. And we're confident that they'll be in good shape. The exact timing, still, we will keep in abeyance, but we're assuming for now, November the 13th remains. And we will talk subsequently about that. We're very, very mindful, of course, about the safety of all concerned, the reputational elements, and of course, making sure the event itself is as at least as robust and as strong as last year. Thank you for your continued patience and support. We have had a few inquiries about it. Meantime, our big news also is that Cardiff Life is returning. There are now barely 10 weeks, which is sort of crazy really, until our return, and we really just cannot wait. Our first issue will be published on September the 25th, but the world may be feeling rather different than it feels right now. Imagine where we all were 10 weeks ago. It's already somewhere in the deep past. 10 weeks time, the business community, commercial, but also the consumer confidence, we think will be in a slightly different place, quite markedly perhaps, than it is right now. Like all independent businesses, we've been really touched by the support that the business community here in Cardiff has given us. We're all flesh and blood, we're all in the same storm, albeit in different boats, and we're all in need of buoying up, and thank you for your response to our news. We are absolutely determined to play our part to the full in this new world, celebrating the best of the city, promoting the businesses, galvanizing business thinking where we can, such as today's event, providing help and insight, and maintaining a plausibly positive tone, giving reassurance about what is happening in Cardiff. We're pushing the hashtag Cardiff together to help celebrate the good there is out there in the city, and we'll continue to do that. Now, for all that some are re-emerging, like hospitality, many businesses haven't paused, they've got on with it, as some of our panelists today, of course. Professional services, for example, have largely continued, and we'll be holding Cardiff Life business surgeries on financial planning, employment and HR, digital marketing, legal services, and more. If you have a professional service, please do talk to us. We can act as a showcase for what you do. So, and of course, they're all free to view, and they're all recorded and shown, as this one will be, on YouTube subsequently. Good luck, good wisdom to all Cardiff businesses. On to our speakers today on this property special. We'll be hearing from, and in this order, Juliet Gamlin, Invest in Cardiff, Rachel Fleri, Specialist Security, and Dave Brown, W2 Construction. So Juliet, we'll run short interviews. I've asked Juliet to come forward. I'll just explain what we'll do. We'll run short interviews with each person, 10, 15 minutes or so, 12 minutes perhaps. And please do send any questions through to our Q&A button you'll see at the bottom, and I'll take those. But I'll ask a few to begin with. Juliet, good morning.
Good morning, Greg. Good morning, everyone.
How are you? How's your volume? Can everyone hear you? I'm sure we can.
Yeah, is that good? Everyone here?
That's very good indeed.
Excellent.
Let's start with the personal, if I may. How have you been during this strange period of lockdown?
Very different, isn't it? Life is very, very different than it was before. Obviously, since lockdown, and most people are working from home now. Other than sort of some of the manufacturing and the health sector have been proactively having to go in our wonderful NHS. But, you know, an impact on people in commercial offices has been very dramatic changes. And I think 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to manage as we've managed today. And technology and the improvements in ICT and technology-driven e-commerce has allowed us to operate and to work quite effectively from home. And I think the transaction we would have seen in 5 years' time is sort of started to happen now, and the way that we work will see huge changes in the future, and again that will affect how the property in the city centre operates.
And we'll come on to exactly that, about the changes wrought by the pandemic and different working patterns and so on. Perhaps for those who don't fully know and haven't quite got the clue in what Invest in Cardiff sounds like, just briefly set the scene about what you do and what you're attempting to do in current times to promote the city.
Yeah, so Invest in Cardiff is really about promoting Cardiff as a city centre. It's about creating new opportunities through investment portfolios. So some of the things we look at are regeneration projects to improve the economic value and the offer of the city centre, as well as Cardiff Bay. But effectively, we're looking to create jobs, to bring new companies into Cardiff, to set up here. We've got a fantastic offer. We've got a very strong talent pool with the 3 universities. We've got a very well-educated city, quality of life. So it's a really great offer for people, and it's for us to sell the city to prospective investors in order that we improve the economic value to the city. So,
and your world is very much about mid to long-term planning, and your time horizons go out longer than many organisations. But how has that worked in recent times? You've had to focus very much on the short term, I'm assuming.
We've got very things like our LDP, we've got the economic strategy that we've planned pre-COVID. So obviously things that we planned for mid and long term may need changes now as the situation has obviously evolved. So the way we do things now, we might not be able to do those in the short to medium term. Hopefully we will get back to some kind of normality long term if there's a vaccine and the virus becomes under some sort of control. But I think at the moment it's making those adjustments in order so that businesses can get on effectively, retailers can trade, and people feel safe to come back to the city centre. So, the things that we're doing is the city centre recovery plan to encourage people back into the city. We've got welcome points, sanitizer, ambassadors welcoming people to the city. So people feel safe, they want to come back. We've lost an element of that just passing trade because there's not as many people working in the city centre in the offices, they're working from home. So it's encouraging people back into the city so that those businesses can start to thrive again.
And how has your tactics have changed? Quite clearly, everyone's tactics in business have had to change. What about your strategy? Has your longer term thinking been affected yet?
Yeah, well, at the moment we're thinking of more local. So it's all about attracting people locally back to the city centre, because obviously we had the 5-mile restriction for quite some time. Now that's opened up. We want to bring local tourism, local businesses back to the city centre, and the people within the city region and within Wales back into Cardiff. to open up the tourism shortly, so museums and bed and breakfast and hotels are due to open in a couple of weeks' time. So, you know, it's about promoting the city, making people feel safe, and that local tourism and local retail as well.
At a UK level, there is apparently due to be some Rooseveltian revolution of infrastructure spending. Any sign of that just yet for Cardiff?
Yeah, well, we're working on a number of schemes at the moment. So some people might be aware we've got the Red Dragon Centre that was recently purchased by the council. We're working on a master plan for that, linking the city and bay. We had 1 billion investment for a new metro, so there's new transport plans, how we're going to link that between the east and the west of the city. So I think one of the most important things for any city that's growing forward is your transport infrastructure. You have to have a strong base of transport. We want to try and, you know, not have as many cars coming into the city because of the air quality issues, car parking, looking at more greener infrastructure so that the way we build the city, the way we master plan the city is much more environmentally friendly. It's much more effective the way we want to go forward for our long-term strategy needs. Power, you know, how there's lots of electric vehicles will be coming on board. How do we then improve the power supply for that green infrastructure? So there's lots of work that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see. We're also working with right takers, so you've got Central Quay. You've just seen Metro Central come into fruition with the Metro Central there. So there's lots of things happening in the Cardiff, and that is progressing. There's still a demand, there's still a need for that infrastructure. That will create the jobs, that will create the economy, and that will, you know, make us a very, you know, have an impact on a global, you know, front for competitive cities, especially as a core city.
And talking about that competitive front, there's a sort of intra-UK competitive point here, which is that, do you expect that Cardiff will benefit from the flight from London? There's a lot of talk about this, that London, both because of it being initially at least the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, but more typically because of the expense, the difficulty and so on, that money will flow and businesses will flow from London out, including such as Cardiff. Is that on your horizon?
Yeah, we're already seeing that, Greg. You know, we're seeing a lot of the sectors, especially from the public sector, they're coming out, they're going into the regions, they're having hubs rather than the central core being in London. People sort of, you know, it's very expensive to live in London. It's very expensive for property. So we've got a great offer in Cardiff. We're very competitive with our offer of property costs, salary costs. So it's a no-brainer really for businesses. And, you know, with IT now, you can work from anywhere. So you don't have to be in London to generate your business. So places like Cardiff are really growing because the offer is so good, and it's very appealing for those businesses who want to look at the bottom line and their costs. You know, COVID has affected the financial ability of companies, so they want to rein in the costs that they're now delivering. So you'll see a lot less people traveling, business flights. You know, you can now work from anywhere. So agile, smarter working really is going to be a huge part of a new strategy going forward for businesses. And they're going to want to keep look at these competitive regional areas.
I could take almost that exact argument word for word and apply it to Cardiff and say, well, actually, Cardiff itself will lose out because the flight from cities will mean that people will work from much more rural places. And so will Cardiff actually lose people who can work from home, can have bigger spaces to live and so on?
Well, there's a little element that, you know, people will start to work from home, but then what's our strategy going to be to bring people back in, whether it's retail, hospitality? There's still a demand for large call centres. There's going to be a huge investment into green infrastructure. So those jobs will be created to deliver green infrastructure, repurposing buildings. So you may see a different type of retail offer in the city centre. You know, the strong companies will remain. There'll be a different type of retail offering. We'll have to look, we're talking to investors now about repurposing buildings. So what kind of offer? Will it be leisure orientated? Could it be more agile space for people to work? And maybe people don't want to work in one large central office. Possibly they want hubs so they can travel to a locality that's easy for for them to access. So therefore, again, you're reducing your carbon footprint with people driving to and from the city centre.
Could you give a couple of examples, maybe not, chapter and verse if it breaches confidentiality, but a couple of examples, one of potential repurposing and how you're thinking, maybe that's retail, I don't know. And then another example of companies outside of Cardiff, the sorts of businesses where you've had inquiries in recent weeks who are considering relocating. So both aspects, please.
Well, some of the investors we're talking to at the moment, they've got quite a high element of retail. So for example, House of Fraser, that property will be coming onto the market shortly. There is not quite such a large demand for large retail stores. You've just seen John Lewis have just announced they're going to close 8 of their stores. Cardiff has a very large retail presence. So it's how you repurpose buildings like that and you make it enticing for people to come in. So you need to get people into the city centre, and what can you offer them to stay longer? So it could be leisure, it could be food and beverage. People want to be entertained. So we're looking at how we can offer our cultural, leisure, creative sector a stronger offer, so that even if people are encouraged to come in the city centre, there's a very different type of offer there as well. So again, it's just about what we can do. We have to work with our planners now to look at how we can change some elements of the city centre, and also city living. You need people to live in the city because they create money, they generate the economy, they're using the facility. So about encouraging more residential within the city centre without losing that employment offer as well. So it's about that mixed use.
And also, a couple of examples of companies who've been inquiring. What sort of sectors are looking to relocate to Cardiff? Other than the obvious.
Quite a lot of financial services with the call centres. They're looking, obviously globalisation has always been what people have been doing, and it's been far reaching. We're seeing people reshoring back to the UK. So there's a number of UK call centres that were outside and now looking to reshore. So there's a couple of inquiries for that. We're seeing some smaller office uptake as well, where people are looking to have a more agile working, so they might not need as much space. But also sort of residential inquiries. But life sciences is very, very strong at the moment, Greg. I've had quite a few overseas as well as local life sciences inquiries. And we're looking to work with a number of developers now to build a life sciences park to the north of the city. And that could generate huge investment for Cardiff with very good job offerings there, good salaries, a very strong talent pool, and working then with the universities to help these businesses to grow. And of
the many dozens of people watching this and subsequent perhaps hundreds watching it on YouTube, if they have a query about either their offering or maybe their investment, what's their relationship with Invest in Cardiff? Should they just drop you a line and see what you can do for them?
We're here to help everybody. Our services are free. We don't cost anything. And we've got all the intelligence on the city. So if they've got any queries, we can help them to make the right decisions. Whether it's a query about what specific talent they're looking for, where they should be located within the city centre, what type of property they should be looking at, we can help them, advise them. But also once a business is within the city, we ensure that we hold their hand, that they have a nice soft entry into the city centre. We get them connected with the business community so they can start their networking and evolve and grow and look to diversify their offer within the city.
Juliet, that's been great, and I can attest, as Juliet was one of our judges in the Cardiff Property Awards, and I have to say you are a very deeply connected person who knows a great deal about Cardiff. So with any form of any property query, beat a path to Juliet and Invest in Cardiff store. Now, if I could ask you to unvidify yourself, whatever it is. And we'll bring in Rachel Fleri. Rachel, good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine. Well, how are you? What's the point?
Good today.
And how have you been in these very strange times?
I've been good. I've actually felt very privileged in terms of my ability to continue to work and operate where other businesses have had to shut. So that's been a massive plus. And I feel privileged in the fact that in working from home or having to be at home and run a business, that's been made easy, given that I'm not perhaps confined to a small space, and that sort of it's made me realise what I have got.
And tell us a little bit about specialist security. 300 people or so, and you work with some very big clients. What do you do, and how has that been affected by these times?
So I provide mostly security officers man guarding to a range of businesses, both private and public sector. So it could be anything from large office buildings, which have obviously been affected, factories, councils, infrastructure projects, and infrastructure in general. So it's a wide range of security provision from the man guarding section.
And so you're right on the front line. You can see what's happening with properties. And I'm going to guess, I don't know, but in these times when companies haven't been present, presumably their security needs have risen. They need visibility, presence, whatever. Is that the case, or?
Yeah, it's interesting listening to businesses that are now reopening and going back. Obviously, before the lockdown, we were starting to get a lot of contact with our clients who were thinking about how they were going to go about this. Obviously, some offices, some buildings were closing down, and therefore their security provision may need to increase. Some infrastructure stopped construction-wise, and that would mean that rather than just occupying sites at night, we would be occupying them in the day as well. So we were ramping up as it came to shut down, where other people were thinking about how they were closing. We were actually stepping up. So the challenge for my business and myself was pre-lockdown, where my biggest concerns were around the staff who were frontline. And it's interesting because it's also brought security to people's minds in terms of they are frontline workers. And when people went home to work, my staff actually stepped up. And there was a lot of activity around how I'm going to keep them safe. So if you imagine pre-lockdown people fighting over hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, it was something that I needed to ensure that my officers had to protect themselves, and yet we were suffering the same difficulties as any home or NHS or care homes in trying to obtain those things to keep people safe.
And you work with, you've got a roster of some major name clients, Network Rail, Savills, Wilmot Dixon, Balfour Beatty, etc. What, again, perhaps without getting into confidentiality issues, what do you think the level of confidence is about that scale of clients, given what's happened? How are they thinking about their second half of this year and into 2021?
I think that most major clients that I've got have had temporary kind of closures, if they have at all. A lot of them have had to remain operational as they're critical. Those that have closed down during lockdown, I feel that the sort of smarter companies have been in the background preparing to open up to a different way of working with social distancing, and whether that be on a construction site, whether it be on infrastructure or offices where they're having to consider how they're going to set their offices out to keep people safe. So I think that during this period, they've been preparing for it so they can hit the ground running when they do open up.
But have some projects been put on hold? Are budgets tighter as a result?
I've not noticed with my clients. I've not been particularly afraid of how they'll come out of lockdown and how they'll manage. I think I don't kind of work in the retail sector and hospitality, so they would be the ones that would have had the biggest effects. Some construction sites shut for several weeks. but they started up sort of before more office buildings, etc., opened up. So I'm confident with how they're feeling. I'm not getting a vibe that they're concerned, but obviously that's just a part of the business community in Cardiff and not its entirety.
You had the pleasure, possibly even the honour of a parliamentary review document late last year. Could you just tell us how that came about, what it was, and consequences, please?
Yeah, I had a letter from Lord Pickles, and at first I thought it was some kind of joke. Open the mail.
This is Eric Pickles, is it? As was?
Oh no, no. So the parliamentary review is written every year with different subjects involved, and last year, the end of last year, it was published early this year. They focused on security. So each year it's different, and they approach companies in the UK to engage with them and see if they want to deliver an article to the parliamentary review. So I contacted them, had a chat, discussed what it was all about, and decided to go ahead with it. So then that involved writing a piece about the business, which was then published for the parliamentary review, which was released, I believe, in March. So it was actually released in lockdown, which was a different situation for them too. The gala dinner was cancelled. It actually, they've approached me since along the same lines as what we're doing here about COVID and how businesses have coped. And so it's actually meant that I've written further articles for them regarding how we as a business have coped and will move forward.
Well, and that's it's an aspect that all businesses have to find their way. Let me just get that back. Have to find their way in current times, and we wish you all the very best. Rachel, we'll ask you to come off video for now as we bring in Dave. And thank you. We'll call you back for the panel session. Thank you. So, Dave, where are you going to come forward? You seem to have you've been empty chaired. I think that's one of those expressions. So, any moment now, I'm sure he's going to ascend to his chair.
There we go.
Very good. Nice pink shirt you're wearing there.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
So, how have you been, and how have you been navigating this lockdown, Dave?
It's been interesting, Greg. It's been an interesting time. I think in the early days there may have been a few concerns of how we were going to get through this, but I think we've had fantastic support from the government, and I think we have discovered some things about ourselves that we didn't realise how good we were at operating without the usual services that we would normally rely on.
What? Sorry, can you just explain that? I didn't quite understand.
So basically, we all operate from an office, but we've found that we can actually work remotely now, even though we cover all areas of Wales,
yeah.
Based in Cardiff. We've been able to operate from our independent homes, as it were. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about W2, and I want to come into the how it's been for the business, because you do a lot of commercial. Well, it's your world: commercial construction and renovation work, but quite a bit of hospitality and retail. How are you now thinking about the business, and what's the sort of near-term projects and prospects?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the commercial and retail projects and developments that we were on at the beginning of this pandemic has changed slightly. A lot of them put a hold on the project. A lot of them stopped projects. So we had to find another way of continuing to operate and continue to run our business. But we work in the insurance business as well. So we've been very fortunate, whereas we've been able to diversify a little bit. And we've worked on insurance claims where there's been flood damaged properties, where there's been no people present. So we've been able to work in void properties as opposed to working in factories and offices where there are loads of people present as we've been doing specific development and design.
But nonetheless, two of your key sectors, hospitality and retail, that must be, you know, a little more clouded horizon for you.
Absolutely, yeah, it is, because it's a big part of what we do. However, we haven't lost any of that work. It's just some of that work has been put on stop until we come out of the other side of this pandemic. And some of that has started already, just to start back. And we're in one in Swansea, and a couple a bit further east. So yeah, we're doing all right.
And how have your teams been during this time? How many were furloughed and brought back and so on?
Yeah, furloughed probably 50% of the staff in the early days, and we will all be, bar probably two which may have, you know, childcare problems, all be back in work as of the 1st of July. So all be off furlough, and I think we've managed quite well. Managed quite well.
Good for you. And so I suspect this is going to be a fairly straightforward one, but what's your current level of confidence and your expectations for the rest of this year and into next?
Well, to be honest, guys, we're really excited because we've diversified during this pandemic. It's given us other options. We have found that we're able to do, and we have other skills that we're using that we probably weren't using before. We're doing lots of surveys via drones. We're doing lots of stuff that we can do remotely without actually going into people's premises. We're using a lot of thermal technology. All the technology that we probably wouldn't have been using prior to this breakdown has come to the forefront, and it's just shown us, with a little bit of forward thinking, a bit of forward momentum, how you can diversify your business and still keep it afloat and even actually grow during such times.
Do you think that net you might actually grow during this period then? Is that that level of optimism?
I think so, in terms of, because we've had a little bit of hold on some work and we've diversified into doing probably more insurance work than we have office refurbishments, etc. It's just come to light now that we're all back in work, all the jobs are coming back on, and we're going to need to expand in terms of taking on more carpenters, more finishers, plasterers and stuff like that, to help us get these jobs done more efficiently and more quickly.
And are you finding inquiries from companies wishing to reshape or refit their offices because they have different needs now, perhaps?
Yeah, there are quite a few. One of the things we've started, we've had a manufacturer in trying to manufacture us some bespoke screens, because areas are going to need to be screened off. We've had a couple of test ones made that we've got in our showroom that we are using ourselves to see how they work for us. So we're working quite actively on that kind of stuff, and I think that'll be a part of the future. I think people are going to want screens and separation of benches and desks and work surfaces, and I think we're able to supply that in various different guises, if you were.
And perhaps with retail clients, has there been maybe a desire to refit in a different way, or to simply just change the offering such that it could be used for different purposes, if it's, from a landlord's perspective?
We've not, in terms of the retail, we haven't, not a lot of the retail have come back online with us just yet. Some of the retail has been a little bit slow in terms of getting back. But from experience, we have one that's just outside the city that we are working with, and they are reshaping their walkways in, walkways out, stuff like that, which we are not really involved in, if I'm truthful.
Yeah, I guess that's more. It's a bit more than aesthetic, but it's more temporary, I guess, and that's not.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Such.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Dave. For now, if you stay on, and if we ask Juliet and Rachel to rejoin us, we'll take a few more questions. Hello again. Thank you for that. I want to talk about clients. You've each touched on this, but I want to talk about their levels of confidence and their business planning Can you just amplify from each of your points of view about how your clients are regarding half of the year and into 2021, their levels of confidence? Perhaps Juliet first. You go across so many different sectors. You must have a pretty good take.
Yeah. Well, I think the pandemic has affected different sectors in different ways. And I think sort of non-food retail and leisure, hospitality has had such a huge impact. And it's what we can do now to encourage people to feel safe, what measures we can put in place as well to support that sector in particularly. Manufacturing are putting safe measures in place for safe working practices. So I think it's all about, you know, how we move that sector forward. So what the council has been doing as well and working with government is there is a number of initiatives that we are bringing forward that we hope will help businesses to start this recovery process. So obviously 5% VAT will be helping restaurants, bars. Part of the economic task force that we're setting up will be looking with our interwork services about how we can get people who have lost or been made redundant through the pandemic into new types of work, how we can reskill them, retrain them. And there are, you know, training grants and so forth for businesses to work with us to help support those different types of skill set changes going forward. We also had the business rate grants, which was very successful. Cardiff alone has given out £17 million to businesses through non-repayable grants to help them to sort of sustain keeping going through this period. And I think businesses have become very diverse. You know, they're coming up with fantastic ideas of how they can deliver things differently, whether restaurants are doing takeaways. And what we realised we need to do is we need to create more space in the city centre so people will come in and feel safe. So we're going to create spill out areas so that the restaurants and bars can use those, and you can order your food via an app online. So Castle Street is being set up now as we speak, should be ready by the end of July, where people can go, they can enjoy that open space, you know, sit in front of the castle, enjoy their food and drink, you know, and start to feel safe to come back to the city centre. Call centres, offices, they're working through their types of strategy, whether there'll be a mix of home working, office, and I think offices will be very much about collaboration work, and you may have some people working from home in the future, or a little bit of a mixed agile element. Life sciences is very strong, so that is having more investment to support the growth of those areas. So as again, you know, there's a lot of initiatives around, and technology driven and e-commerce will be very, very strong to support those businesses going forward. Those who use technology will be the stronger survivors out of this.
Thanks. And Rachel, you've touched on some of your clients, but talk about the confidence levels that you're seeing, or otherwise. Are companies, you know, going through a cautious period that now is not the time to risk? It's conserve what you have, take a view in a few months' time, or is it more business as usual?
I think a lot of my clients have had to implement and think about how they're going to operate in the future. And they've already been doing that during this period of lockdown. So I think people are confident. To touch on Juliet's point about office space, and so where there are offices, there seems to be a move towards consideration about well-being of the staff. So flexibility in how people work, and then if they are in offices, their well-being, and that extends beyond the general health into mental health. So I think that a lot of businesses are confident, because the businesses I've been working with have during the period sort of considered how they're going to operate in the future. So I would say people are confident and excited about moving forward and looking for opportunities. I think in every catastrophe or you know, we all have to look for opportunities, and so those that focus on the opportunities ahead are going to have a positive attitude moving forward.
And Dave, you've made the point that you've been focusing on opportunities, but to ask you a bit further about your clients and their levels of confidence about projects they might otherwise have committed to, anything being put on hold, deferred, or whatever, a bit more caution?
Yes, Greg, there's been quite a few jobs that have actually been put on hold. They've not been really cancelled as such, but they've just been put on hold. One, because they haven't wanted us really present and working in the environment where they've got people milling around, so they put it on stop until such times that things can be made safe for us to work. But generally, I think the confidence is pretty good. And do you know, as a Welsh nation, I think we're quite a resilient bunch of people, and we're quite forward-thinking. We're very innovative. I think we're really good at what we do. I think Wales, Cardiff, I think we're a fantastic nation. I think sometimes we shine a little bit higher than those people that are gathered around us, especially at times like this.
I've got a couple of questions, maybe from the same person. It's our good friend Anonymous, so I don't know who it is. Question, I'll run both questions together actually. Have you been able to employ more staff during the pandemic, or have you found losses in staff? That's primarily, of course, for Dave and Rachel. And then, sort of related point, have you guys found staff wanting to return to the workplace or reluctant to join the office? Can you pick up those points, please? Perhaps Rachel first.
Yeah, okay. So when, just before lockdown, one of my major considerations was the office staff and myself. Obviously, in order, as a critical part of the workforce, we've had to keep going. And frontline. So we did obviously need to recruit, and that was a challenge, because obviously when you recruit security officers, it's very useful to be face to face. There's paperwork, we need to see passports, licenses, ID, all these kind of things. So we did have to recruit a small amount, but one of the things that I did was purposely not chase work down. So I serviced my current client and predominantly, and so I had to minimise the recruitment because of the processes putting people at risk in the office. So we did take people
on. And from our point of view, we've not taken anybody on during this period. I had a few of my staff that were probably a little bit nervous about coming to work, so in terms of the furloughing and coming back to work. But as a result of probably slowing down on some of the work, we're in a position now where we are actively looking to recruit some more people so we can complete the work within a given time scale. So whereas we'd have had those jobs and we'd have had a longer time scale to finish them, the time scales are now reduced, so we need to complete them a little bit quicker. So we are actively now going to be on a bit of a recruitment drive, and would hopefully look at some of these people that have lost their jobs because of this pandemic. So hopefully we'll be able to aid in sort of taking those off, claiming security or whatever they do, or socials and stuff like that. We'll be able to give them full-time employment. And
Juliet, it may well be the case that what we're all thinking now is not what we'll be thinking in 10 weeks' time or some such, and we'll all be, both of these are the two panels are very positive. You're seeing many different sorts of businesses, but in terms of that point about reluctance for returning to the workplace, is that something your clients are saying?
There's the unknown factors. We're still learning about the virus and the impact. So there's people with underlying health conditions, as Rachel's saying, the welfare of staff, there's been this nervousness to come back. So I think it's really, the focus is about making people feel confident, making sure you've got the right safety measures and tools in place to give the confidence for people to come back. But also, we need to get the economy going as well. And we want people to come back and to feel safe in that environment. So there's lots of things we're doing. The flexible furlough scheme is going to start to help people to come back, because some businesses need to transition to see what the impact will be. So certain bars and restaurants will bring a certain element of their staff back. And if the trade isn't there, then obviously they've got some very tough decisions to make. So for my role and for Invest in Cardiff, it's about supporting those businesses to try and encourage people back to make them feel safe, to make sure that the city is safe, but also then to look for those opportunities for new jobs so that we can help people who maybe have been made unemployed during this very challenging time, that we can help them to get back into employment quickly and help them to reskill. They may suddenly decide they've got a completely different future ahead of them, and it could be a time for aspirational changes as well as, you know, revisiting what your life was like before and maybe making more positive changes. So
and talking of new opportunities, we've had sorry to interrupt, we've had a question from James Morgan. I think I actually know 3 James Morgans. I don't know which one but he has said, does the current climate and willingness to work remotely allow Welsh businesses to reach markets further afield, perhaps previously considered as out of region? It's quite a positive point. Do you buy that point?
I completely agree. You know, sometimes we've got to be a little bit more aspirational as to where our markets are going to be. You know, we're moving forward now with Brexit. We've got to look at new opportunities of working further afield. And technology will allow us to reach out and connect with those further afield organisations, which we maybe haven't brought ourselves to do before. We have to think of new ways of expanding our businesses and diversifying. So I think actually there are a lot of opportunities out there. And those strong businesses, and you know, as Dave was saying, we're very resilient in Wales. Those strong businesses will make those changes. You know, we have the gin distillery that has turned to hand sanitizer. You know, so businesses know what their skill set is, and they can turn their hand to making, you know, the adjustments that they need to. And I think there's lots of positive outlays, but things will be different, Greg. You know, e-commerce will be a very strong factor, digitalization, and obviously 5G, because you're going to have the AI and the technology industries and life sciences moving forward in a very strong capacity.
Dave and Rachel, are you likewise confident that necessity is the mother of invention, or whatever it is, that we're all having to be ingenious and pivot to new business models? But perhaps to James's point, by the way, this is the James from Curry and Brown, not one of the other 2 James Morgans. You're confident that there are those opportunities? I mean, it's a very outward-looking point. Do you agree with that?
There are. I think that becoming more digital does offer opportunity to Cardiff, because, you know, if people see the hub as London, etc., well, if everyone's working from home, does it matter where they're working? So I think there is adequate opportunity. And again, as Juliet has mentioned, that, you know, it's the one thing we do have to consider is how well the IT infrastructure is in Cardiff. So things like the 5G, etc. So people, when they are at home, do have the good internet signals, etc., to communicate well.
One point, perhaps going the other way, it's been apparent during lockdown that sort of lockdown makes everything more local, that we're all that much more aware of our locales, we're exploring them physically, we're you know, shopping more locally with independents and so on. And actually there's even a trend to the micro-local, that if you buy the argument that more people are going to be working from home, there'll be more people who are spending time and money in shops, bars, restaurants within 15-20 minutes of their workplace, which is called home, as to the city centre. Do you see that potential growth of the hyper-local as being a factor? And if so, what does that mean for property?
I think so, Greg. I think in terms of, from my own experience, where you would normally run to your larger superstore, you've got those in your local village, whether it be a fruit and veg store, whether it be a fishmonger or a butcher's, you would rather, because you want to support those local businesses. So I think I personally have done that, and I know a lot of people in the village that I live have been doing exactly the same. And I think that makes a massive difference to the local economy as well as the larger diverse economy, for sure. And in terms of when you go on to property, I then think that helps with your, I don't know, the property values, if you like, in that area.
Yeah. Rachel, do you think that that sort of hyper-local is going to sort of spread the way that business value is and property value is?
It's an interesting thought, because on one hand you think, right, people are going to be able to move further away from cities if they're home working, and therefore the property prices in Cardiff would drop, or people would be less likely to live in the city. However, then you've got another side of it, where if people don't want to commute on public transport because they're nervous, those people who work in frontline areas in the city perhaps are going to be more likely to come to the city to live. I personally live in the city, and my office is in the city. The one thing that I've done differently is I bought a bike, and I cycle to the office now most of the time, but I have noticed the roads getting increasingly busy. So maybe there won't be the changes that we think. Maybe people will just revert back to how they've always been. But I've definitely seen an improvement in local community spirit and attitude and shopping.
Yeah, and maybe that reversion will be particularly so in the autumn, as you know, as weather gets worse and so on. Juliet, do you buy that point that the hyperlocal means that valuations of property and so on may actually extend beyond the city centre? That's where the sort of halo effect might be.
We are seeing quite a draw at the moment to urbanisation away from the city, whether that's just a short-term thing at the moment, or we have to wait and see how that happens. It is very local community focused. I'm on a group WhatsApp for our community, and you see all the people putting, different shops and takeaways. And I think it's really great, because if you can't go to a bar and restaurant, you can support your local community by getting your takeaways or having your home deliveries. So I think that's made the way that we live our lives quite different. Whereas before we'd be going out spending money in bars and restaurants, we're spending it more on better food at home, laying the tables differently. And there is very much about supporting your local businesses. Now, when it comes to property, there's obviously going to be quite a few empty retail units at the moment due to the effects of COVID. Again, we'll repurpose those, but there is still demand in those local areas, and I think you will see that grow as well. Wait to see yet how those property prices are affected. They may stay the same. You may find there'll be more incentives offered rather than the actual rents will change. So it could be an incentive type thing, because obviously the investors who own those still have their costs to adhere to. But I think local shopping is great if we can keep more of that, but also we want to encourage people back to the city as well. So I think if you can get a good mix of the two, we're sort of definitely moving in the right direction.
What about you, Dave, in terms of both resi and commercial property values, net with all the different and we've discussed on them today, some of the pushes and pulls and different societal effects and so on. Do you think that property itself is going to be, in terms of valuation, in a better place next year than now, or is it just going to be very uncertain?
I think it'll vary from place to place, Greg, but what I've noticed is a lot of people spending a lot of time doing home improvements in this time. Loads of people have built bars at the bottom of their garden, they've built extensions, they've done garages, they've done conservatories, and I think that's money that they would have probably not spent as wisely had it not been for this period of time. So I think a lot of people have invested in their property, therefore their property houses will take on extra value, and I think that will have a knock-on effect. And I think on the whole, I don't think it's going to drop. It'll stabilise, and I think it'll go forward rather than destabilise and drop.
And Rachel, I've heard the argument that precisely because people have been spending so much time at home, one, their homes are that much more tired because they've been worked harder, but two, they've got a greater desire, to Dave's point, to rejuvenate, extend, improve their homes, and that's quite a growth area from a business point of view domestically. Something you concur with?
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard about people making home improvements, and will obviously continue to do so. I guess the issue and the major consideration in all this is, are people going to have jobs? And that's where the concern is. So if people do lose their jobs, then they won't have the money to invest in their properties. But people always need homes. I wear another hat as a non-exec director for a large housing association. and their development is continuing as normal, perhaps with a different view of community. And I know we've talked about it on our away day last week, how may design of housing change for the future. One of the things I would have suggested, or I did, was, you know, building properties that face each other and this community. But we're always going to need housing. The population, unless things go terribly wrong, isn't set to decrease dramatically, and housing is always a need. And another thing that I've been doing during lockdown, which has been a big increase in my work, I work for one of the councils, use it in housing. And I'm sure you're all aware, all the homeless have had to be rehoused during COVID. And that's opened a line of work for me and an observation. And how are we going to house everybody in the future? And so I've seen properties repurposed to create temporary housing for the homeless. And moving forward, I think properties locally and it's got to increase because people need homes.
Okay, we've had a question from David Dulu of Dragonfly. Do the panel feel that the Western Gateway project presents strong opportunities for Wales and Cardiff? Are you going to disagree with that? What's your take on Western Gateway?
Is that for me, Greg?
Probably.
Yeah. I know it's something that we are working towards at the moment. I think we were due to be at a large property conference, and we were working with the Western Gateway. I know our leader Hugh is definitely looking at those proposals, so sort of things like large energy projects, transport infrastructure projects, and those big opportunities are better served when you've got a larger population. So if you bring in a region or two regions together, it's a bit like the Northern Powerhouse. So if we want to be competitive with the Northern Powerhouse, we have to have a bigger offer and that population as well to, you know, to get those larger projects moving. So I think there is some movement that there's always going to be different cities will have different ideas, and it's how you merge those ideas to come to an agreement. So I think once you can agree on what your growth strategies are going to be for that particular region and that gateway, then you can start to move forward. But I think the initial tough decisions are what's going to be your strategy, and you've all got to agree on it. But if you can get there, there's a lot of opportunities to be had that, you know.
And talking of government initiatives and supports, the UK government, which I suppose increasingly seems to mean the English government these days, is changing or has changed stamp duty thresholds. What initiatives would you like to see from a property point of view, either residential or commercial, for Wales? Rachel, perhaps.
I think
I can see you were very pleased to be asked that one.
I don't mind. I think that in terms of commercial property, there needs to be incentive. However, as we've touched on, you know, people may be looking to work from home more, but where you have offices, which you're going to need, there's going to need more space in those to allow people to socially distance. In terms of incentives, well, I think the Welsh Government has announced now the £250,000 threshold, which is great. Perhaps it could have been more, because that would encourage not just people to buy, but to move. So obviously, you know, you do get chains in property. So that could have perhaps been higher. And yeah, I think that in terms of commercial, there perhaps does need to be incentives in the future to attract people to our city centres, especially if some companies decide to not renew leases and go for the new type of homework. And I'm sure there are plans afoot, and people are talking about this behind the scenes.
Dave or Juliet, any new initiatives which you'd wish to see, or are you content there's enough good thinking out there to support the economy and residential properties and so on?
I think in terms of some of the commercial properties, I think there needs to be a little bit more thought put in, because there has been a few of the larger companies where they have massive rates and massive rent. There needs to be some kind of initiative that allows them to come back to work, because there have been one or two that have been closing. They've been emptying out their stores. There's been loss of jobs. So I think there needs to be a big think tank put together there on how we stop more of those closing and even create a few more to open. So I'm not sure quite where that goes, Greg, but I think there does need to be some hard thought put in.
And Juliet, you've touched on quite a lot already, but any new things you're lobbying for that you could share with us?
Well, obviously, Rachel's saying we're hoping to have an announcement from Welsh Government later about the land transaction tax and what that will be going forward, because obviously it's named differently than England. But we've had things like the Economic Resilience Fund, where large companies and small companies can apply for support as an incentive to help their business through these very difficult times. There's also the job retention scheme. So if you keep somebody on after furlough, then you can have £1,000 per person. So there's a number of schemes that are in place. And I think they're evolving as we find out how the situation moves forward. So I suppose it's sort of, we're proactively seeing what the situation is at the moment, and then we have to see what impact those schemes already have moving forward, and do there need to be more incentives? I was talking to some of the house builders, and because we still have a high demand for residential property, there is still a demand and there's still people buying, and as chains break, because people maybe have been laid off through furlough or for other reasons, they're quickly being resold again. And so I think the residential side is still moving forward on the new build, but maybe some of the existing build, the land transaction tax will help people. And we were sort of saying, as people working from their home office, that will have an impact on the space they need in their homes. If people are going from office to home, will they build an extension and make an office from it so they feel more comfortable to work from home? Or will they buy another house which has got an extra room that they can create into an office?
One way or another, property will be affected, has been already and will be affected by this pandemic, whether that's domestically, as Juliet has been touching on, or commercially, what it might mean for city centres, office places, places of work and so on. And I think we've explored a number of good topics today. And in closing, I would like to thank Juliet, Rachel and Dave, our panellists today. And to all of you for your time today and your questions. Please look out for the next Cardiff Life Business Club and our business surgeries. Also the Cardiff Property Awards in a timely fashion. The nominations open for that just next week. Good luck to all of you listening to this, navigating these unimagined times. This has been a Media Clash production. This has been the 3rd Cardiff Life Business Club. Thank you. Cardiff together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Greg.
Cheers.
Thanks, Greg.